Have you ever felt so cornered by life that you take any chance, no matter how impossible it seemed? This is a story about a choice like that, a choice that leads a young woman into a gilded cage, where a dying child holds the key to her past and her future. It's a story of secrets, heartbreak, and a love so unexpected it feels like a miracle. Prepare yourself, because once you step into this mansion, nothing will ever be the same. Amelia Hayes was a prodigy, the star of her psychology program at Columbia University. But the real world had been cruel. An orphan since her teens, she had fought for everything she had, only to have her career sabotaged by powerful men who couldn't take no for an answer, falsely accused of misconduct at a prestigious clinic, and then nearly assaulted by a superior at another. Her reputation was in tatters. Blacklisted and broke, she was on the verge of losing her small apartment. The phone call from Julian Croft, a reclusive tech billionaire, wasn't just a job offer. It was a lifeline. He needed a live-in psychotherapist for his daughter, Lily, who was battling a rare genetic disorder and had retreated into a world of silence. The salary was astronomical, but the conditions were severe. It was a deal made from desperation, for a woman who had nothing left to lose, and a man who was about to lose everything that mattered. The voice on the phone was like chilled steel, precise, devoid of warmth, and utterly commanding. "Ms. Hayes, let me be clear. I require your undivided attention for my daughter, 24 hours a day. My estate is in the Hudson Valley. It is isolated. For the first 3 months, you will have no days off. None. Your compensation will be substantial, enough to erase any financial concerns you might have." Julian Croft didn't ask questions. He stated terms. Amelia clutched the phone, the eviction notice on her coffee table seeming to mock her. She could feel the walls of her tiny New York apartment closing in. Her academic brilliance, her empathy, her years of study, all of it had led to this moment of absolute desperation. She took a deep, shaky breath. "I understand the terms, Mr. Croft." Her voice was steadier than she felt. "A car will be at your address tomorrow at 8 a.m. sharp. The driver's name is Ben. Do not be late." The line went dead. Amelia stared at the silent phone, a profound sense of dread mixing with a sliver of hope. She was stepping into the unknown, a gilded prison where her only company would be a dying girl and her powerful, enigmatic father. The next morning, a black sedan, so polished it reflected the grey city sky, waited at her curb precisely at 8. The driver, Ben, a man with a kind, weathered face, loaded her 2 worn suitcases into the trunk without a word. The drive out of the city was a blur of concrete and steel slowly giving way to the fiery colours of late autumn. They drove for hours, deeper into a landscape of rolling hills and dense forests. Finally, they turned onto a private road, passing through an imposing wrought-iron gate. The estate, Croft Manor, was not just a house. It was a fortress of stone and glass, nestled among ancient oak trees. It was beautiful, but its grandeur felt cold, almost mournful. As she stepped out of the car, the air was crisp, smelling of damp earth and wood smoke. A severe-looking woman with her grey hair pulled into a tight bun stood on the porch. "I am Eleanor, the head of household," she announced, her voice as starched as her uniform. "Welcome to Croft Manor. Mr. Croft is waiting for you in his study." Amelia's heart pounded. This was it, the start of her new life, or her new sentence. Julian Croft's study was a cathedral of dark wood and leather, lined with thousands of books. A vast window looked out onto the sprawling, meticulously kept grounds. He stood by the window, a tall, imposing figure with silver hair and eyes the colour of a stormy sea. He didn't turn as she entered. "My daughter Lily is 16, he began, his voice low and resonant. "She has a degenerative autoimmune disease. It's genetic, passed down from her mother. The doctors have given her a timeline, a year, perhaps less." He finally turned to face her, and Amelia saw the raw pain etched into his handsome features. It was a grief so profound it seemed to suck the air from the room. On top of that, she has Asperger's. She hasn't spoken a word in 2 years. She barely moves. She just exists. The previous caregivers have all failed. They saw only the illness. I need you to see the person, Miss Hayes. I need you to find my daughter, wherever she has gone. Can you do that? The question hung in the air, a challenge and a plea. It was an impossible task, but looking into the eyes of this broken man, Amelia knew she had to try. The tour of the house was conducted by Eleanor. Every surface gleamed, every room was immaculate, yet a heavy silence permeated the entire mansion. It felt less like a home and more like a museum, where the exhibits were memories of a happier time. Amelia met the rest of the small staff. There was Sam, Eleanor's son, a quiet, broad-shouldered man who served as the groundskeeper, his hands perpetually stained with earth. And there was Sophia, the maid, a young woman with stunning looks and a watchful, calculating gaze that made Amelia vaguely uncomfortable. Amelia's room was in a separate wing, connected to her patient's suite. It was luxurious, with a king-size bed and a private balcony overlooking the gardens, but the window to Lily's room had a one-way mirror. Mr. Croft insists on constant observation, Eleanor explained flatly. Amelia's stomach churned. The isolation, the surveillance, the weight of expectation. It was overwhelming. She unpacked her few belongings, the books on cognitive therapy looking small and inadequate in the vast, impersonal space. She was truly alone here. Meeting Lily was like encountering a ghost. The girl's room was kept in a perpetual twilight, heavy curtains blocking out the sun. She sat in a specialized wheelchair by the window, staring out at a world she couldn't or wouldn't engage with. She was beautiful, with pale skin and a cascade of blonde hair, but her face was a perfect, emotionless mask. Her blue eyes were vacant, unfocused. "Lily," Amelia said softly, kneeling beside the wheelchair. "My name is Amelia. I'm going to be staying with you for a while." There was no reaction, not a flicker of an eyelash, not a twitch of a muscle. It was as if she were a porcelain doll. Amelia felt a pang of despair. This was worse than she had imagined. The clinical detachment she had been taught at university felt useless here. This wasn't about a diagnosis on a chart. This was about reaching a soul that had locked itself away from the world, and Amelia had no idea if she even had the right key. The first few days bled into a monotonous routine. Mornings were for medical procedures, IV, drips and injections administered by a visiting nurse, which Lily endured with silent passivity. Amelia would then feed her, each spoonful a small battle against an unyielding emptiness. In the afternoons, she would wheel Lily through the silent gardens, talking to her constantly. She described the colours of the leaves, the scent of the pine trees, the feel of the cool breeze. She read poetry aloud, her voice the only sound in the vast, quiet landscape. She spoke of her own life, her dreams, her loneliness, laying her own soul bare in the hope of provoking a response. But Lily remained a silent statue, a beautiful, heartbreaking enigma. At night, exhausted, Amelia would fall into bed, the silence of the mansion pressing down on her. She dreamed of Lily's vacant eyes and woke up with the chilling fear that she, too, was becoming a ghost in this house of sorrow. One evening, while Julian was away on business, Amelia sat with Eleanor in the massive gleaming kitchen. The housekeeper, whose stern exterior hid a deep well of kindness, was telling stories about Lily as a little girl. Before the worst of the illness set in, she loved animals, Eleanor said, her voice thick with nostalgia. "We had a golden retriever, Sunshine. Lily would bury her face in his fur and make these little humming sounds. It was the closest she ever came to a laugh." A spark ignited in Amelia's mind. An idea, so simple yet so radical, began to form. The next day, she spent hours in the mansion's library, devouring research papers on animal-assisted therapy for children on the autism spectrum. The evidence was compelling. The unconditional, non-judgmental companionship of an animal could often break through barriers that humans could not. It was a long shot, a gamble. But in this house of last resorts, a gamble was all she had left. She began to prepare her proposal for Mr. Croft, her heart beating with a nervous energy she hadn't felt in months. Presenting the idea to Julian Croft was terrifying. She found him in his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand, the shadows under his eyes deeper than ever. She laid out her research, her voice clear and professional, citing studies and clinical trials. He listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he was silent for a long time, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "An animal," he said, his voice heavy with skepticism. "You think a dog is going to succeed when millions of dollars in medical science have failed?" Amelia met his gaze. "I think it's a chance, Mr. Croft. A chance for a connection. A chance for her to feel something other than pain or numbness. What do we have to lose?" His gaze softened, the armour of the billionaire cracking to reveal the desperate father beneath. He let out a long, weary sigh. "Fine," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Find a dog. Try your experiment. God knows I'm out of ideas." It wasn't an enthusiastic endorsement, but it was a yes. A flicker of hope had been allowed into the darkness of Croft Manor. Ben drove Amelia to a breeder specialising in Newfoundland dogs, known for their gentle, patient nature. From a litter of tumbling black fur balls, one puppy seemed different. While the others yelped and wrestled, he sat quietly, watching Amelia with intelligent, soulful eyes. When she picked him up, he didn't squirm, but simply rested his head on her shoulder and let out a soft sigh. "This is the one," she said, her voice choked with emotion. They named him Bear. Back at the manor, Amelia brought the puppy into Lily's room. She placed him gently on the floor near the wheelchair. Bear waddled over, sniffed Lily's limp hand, and then did something extraordinary. He licked it, a soft, warm swipe of his tiny tongue, and then rested his furry head on her foot. Amelia held her breath, watching Lily's face, and then she saw it, a barely perceptible twitch at the corner of her mouth, a slight widening of her vacant eyes. It was the smallest of reactions, a tremor in the deep stillness, but it was there. It was a start. For the first time in a long time, Amelia felt a genuine surge of hope. The days that followed were transformed by the puppy's presence. Bear was a small, clumsy ball of chaos and affection in the sterile, silent house. He became Lily's constant shadow, sleeping at the foot of her bed, resting his head on her lap as Amelia wheeled her through the gardens. The changes in Lily were subtle, almost imperceptible to an outsider, but to Amelia they were monumental. Lily's hands, which had always been limp and still, would sometimes twitch when Bear nudged them. Her eyes would follow him as he tumbled around the room. One afternoon, as Sam was teaching Bear to fetch a softball in the garden, Lily's head turned, a deliberate, conscious movement to watch them. Sam caught Amelia's eye and gave a small, incredulous smile. The heavy cloak of despair that had shrouded the house for so long was beginning to lift, stitch by stitch. Bear wasn't a cure, but he was a bridge, a furry, four-legged link between Lily's silent world and theirs. Life settled into a new, more hopeful rhythm. Amelia's conversations with Lily were no longer monologues. They were dialogues where Lily's part was played by the focus of her gaze, or the slight tensing of her hand on Bear's fur. One crisp December morning, a call came from her best friend Chloe. "Mia, you're not going to believe this. I'm getting married. I'm moving to London with Mark in 2 weeks." Amelia's heart sank even as she expressed her happiness. Chloe was her only real connection to her old life, her only family. The thought of her being an ocean away intensified her own profound isolation. "We're having a bachelorette party on New Year's Eve in the city," Chloe continued, her voice bubbling with excitement. "You have to be there. It's my last night, as a free woman. No excuses." Amelia's first instinct was to refuse. The rules were clear. But the thought of seeing Chloe one last time, of feeling like a normal 26-year-old for just one night, was a powerful temptation. It was a piece of her own life she desperately wanted to reclaim. Mustering all her courage, Amelia requested a meeting with Julian Croft. She explained the situation, her voice trembling slightly. "I know the terms of my employment, Mr. Croft, but my friend, she's like a sister to me. This is my only chance to say goodbye." She expected a flat refusal, a cold reminder of their agreement. Instead, he looked at her, then glanced through the open door towards Lily's room, where the girl was sitting on the floor, tentatively stroking Bear's soft fur. He saw the progress, the life that had seeped back into the house because of this young woman. "You have done more for my daughter in 2 months than anyone has in years," he said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Go, see your friend. But I need you back here by the end of the night. My eldest son, Ethan, is flying in from Europe for the holidays. I want the family to be together." Amelia was stunned. She stammered her thanks, her heart soaring with a mixture of gratitude and the thrilling, terrifying prospect of a single night of freedom. A night to be Amelia Hayes again, not just a caregiver. On New Year's Eve, Ben drove her into the city. She changed at Chloe's apartment, shedding her drab, functional work clothes like a second skin. Chloe, a budding fashion designer, had made her a dress, a stunning, midnight blue silk gown that clung to her curves and made her feel beautiful for the first time in years. "Mia, you look like a goddess," Chloe breathed, her eyes wide with admiration. At the chic downtown club, surrounded by music and laughter and Chloe's vibrant friends, Amelia felt a dizzying sense of release. She danced, she drank a glass of champagne, and for a few hours the weight of Croft Manor lifted. She was just a young woman celebrating with her best friend, but the past had a way of finding her. Across the crowded room she locked eyes with a man she never wanted to see again. Chase. The charismatic surgical resident from her past, the one who had pursued her relentlessly and then bragged about their one night together as if it were a conquest. His predatory smile sent a chill down her spine. Chase sauntered over, his arrogance undiminished. "Well, well, Amelia Hayes. I almost didn't recognize you without the lab coat. You clean up nice." His eyes roamed over her body in a way that made her skin crawl. "What's the matter? Not happy to see me?" Chloe stepped in, protective. "She's with us, Chase. Go away." But he ignored her, his focus entirely on Amelia. "Come on, Mia. Let's have a drink for old time's sake. Don't be like that." His persistence was a grim reminder of why she had hidden herself away, why she had adopted a plain, almost invisible persona at the Croft estate. She tried to refuse politely, to disengage, but he was relentless, grabbing her arm. "Don't walk away from me," he hissed, his charming facade slipping. Panic began to bubble in Amelia's chest. The joyful atmosphere of the club suddenly felt threatening, suffocating. She felt trapped, just as she had been in all those other sterile, professional rooms where men thought they owned her. "Is there a problem here?" A deep, calm voice cut through the tension. A man had appeared beside them, tall and broad-shouldered, with kind eyes and a quiet confidence that was the complete antithesis of Chase's bluster. He wasn't looking at Chase. He was looking at Amelia, a question in his gaze. Chase scoffed. "This is a private conversation, buddy. Butt out." But the stranger didn't move. "She looks uncomfortable," he said simply, his voice still low but now with an edge of steel. "I think you should leave." The confrontation escalated quickly. Chase, fueled by alcohol and a bruised ego, shoved the stranger. In the ensuing scuffle, Chase stumbled backward, grabbing a glass of red wine from a nearby table and flinging its contents in a final pathetic act of spite. The dark liquid splashed across the front of Amelia's beautiful silk dress, a violent, ugly stain. The moment was ruined. Humiliated and on the verge of tears, Amelia just wanted to disappear. The stranger took her hand. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you out of here." He led her through the crowd to a quieter corner near the coat check. "I'm so sorry about your dress," he said, his voice full of genuine regret. "And about that guy. He's a real piece of work." Amelia could only nod, trying to blink back tears of frustration and anger. "Thank you," she managed to say, "for stepping in." "It was nothing," he said, with a small smile. "I'm Ethan, by the way." "Amelia." They stood in a comfortable silence for a moment, an island of calm in the chaotic club. There was an immediate, inexplicable connection between them, a sense of recognition. On an impulse she couldn't explain, driven by a desire to salvage something from the disastrous evening, she looked at him. "Can you get me out of here? I mean really out of here." He seemed to understand what she was asking, what she needed. Not just an escape from the club, but an escape from her life, if only for a few hours. He nodded. "My car is just around the corner." They drove through the glittering city streets, not speaking much, but the silence wasn't awkward. It was filled with an unspoken understanding. He didn't press her for details about Chase or her life. He simply offered his quiet, reassuring presence. She directed him to her old apartment, the one she was about to lose. It was a strange choice, but it was the only space that was truly hers. Inside, the small, sparsely furnished room felt like a sanctuary. The night unfolded in a way that felt both reckless and completely natural. It was a collision of two lonely souls on a night dedicated to new beginnings. The passion between them was fierce and tender, a desperate act of connection in a world that had left them both feeling adrift. It wasn't about love, not yet. It was about a shared human need to be seen, to be held, to forget the world outside for one perfect stolen night. For the first time in forever, Amelia didn't feel like a victim, a caregiver, or an orphan. She just felt like a woman. Amelia woke up to the pale light of dawn filtering through her window. She was alone. The space beside her in the bed was empty, though the faint, pleasant scent of his cologne lingered on the pillow. A wave of sadness washed over her, mixed with a strange sense of peace. She hadn't expected him to stay. Their night together was a beautiful, ephemeral thing, not meant to survive the harsh light of day. She found no note, no phone number. He was a ghost, a handsome stranger who had rescued her and then vanished. She showered and dressed, putting back on her sensible drab clothes, the uniform of her other life. The midnight blue dress lay in a heap on the floor, the wine stain a dark, ugly blotch. It felt like a metaphor, a beautiful dream, now spoiled by reality. She called Ben, the driver. It was time to go back, time to return to the gilded cage and the silent girl who was waiting for her. The drive back to the estate was silent. The festive lights of the city gave way to the stark, leafless trees of the countryside. As they pulled up to the grand entrance of Croft Manor, Amelia felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. She had broken the rules, not just by staying out all night, but by letting a stranger into her life, into her heart, however briefly. What had she been thinking? The house was quiet when she entered, everyone preparing for the evening's small formal celebration. She went straight to Lily's room. The girl was sitting in her chair, watching Bear chew on a toy. She looked up as Amelia entered, and for the first time, her eyes held a spark of what looked like recognition. It was fleeting, but it was enough. Amelia felt a rush of guilt and renewed purpose. This was where she belonged. This was what mattered. The night in the city was a fantasy. This was her reality. The New Year's Eve dinner was a quiet affair in the grand dining room. Julian was there, looking tired but pleased. Eleanor had outdone herself with the meal. Even Sophia, the maid, seemed to be in a festive spirit. Amelia had helped Lily into a soft lilac dress, and she sat at the table, a silent but present member of the group. Bear lay faithfully at her feet. The atmosphere was subdued but warm. A little before midnight, Julian stood up. Ethan's plane just landed. He should be here any minute. He wanted to surprise his sister. A few minutes later, the front door opened, and Julian walked back into the dining room. With him was a tall man smiling, his cheeks flushed from the cold. "Everyone," Julian said proudly. "This is my son, Ethan." Amelia's blood ran cold. She looked up from her plate and her eyes met those of the man from the club, the stranger, her rescuer, her lover. Ethan's smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock. The room fell silent. The air crackled with a tension that was almost unbearable. Amelia felt the colour drain from her face. Of all the men in the world, it had to be him. The son, her employer's son. Ethan stared at her, his mind clearly racing to connect the passionate woman from the night before with the plainly dressed caregiver sitting at his family's table. It was an impossible, catastrophic coincidence. He opened his mouth to say something, but before any words could come out, another sound filled the room. A small, hesitant voice. "Ethan!" Everyone turned. The voice had come from Lily. She was looking at her brother, her hand outstretched, a faint, fragile smile on her lips. It was the first word she had spoken in 2 years, the first smile anyone had seen since she was a small child. The shock of Ethan and Amelia's recognition was completely eclipsed by the magnitude of this miracle. Chaos erupted. Julian rushed to his daughter's side, his eyes filled with tears of disbelief and joy. Eleanor was openly weeping. Sam was grinning from ear to ear. They all crowded around Lily, talking to her, touching her, as if to confirm she was real. In the confusion, Amelia slipped out of the room, her heart hammering against her ribs. She needed to breathe, to think. She fled to her room, her mind a whirlwind of shock, fear, and a strange, dizzying elation. A miracle had happened, a true, undeniable miracle. But it was tangled up in the most unprofessional, impossibly complicated situation she could have ever imagined. She was in love, or something dangerously close to it, with her patient's brother, her boss's son. She had crossed a line she could never uncross. A soft knock came at her door. "Amelia!" It was Ethan's voice. "Can we talk?" She let him in. They stood on opposite sides of the room, the space between them charged with unspoken questions. "So," he began, a wry, incredulous smile playing on his lips, "the mousy caregiver is actually a beautiful siren who drags strange men from bars." Despite the gravity of the situation, Amelia felt a small laugh escape her. "And the chivalrous knight is actually the heir to the entire kingdom." He grew serious. "Amelia, last night, I didn't know, I swear." "I know," she whispered. "Neither did I." He crossed the room and gently took her hands. His touch sent a jolt through her. "What Lily did, that was you. You brought her back. My father told me about the progress she's made, about Bear. You brought life back into this house. You brought my sister back to us." He looked at her, his eyes full of an emotion she couldn't quite name. "I came back to the city this morning. I went to your apartment. I had a bottle of champagne and a ridiculous bouquet of flowers. I thought I'd lost you." That night marked a profound shift in the house. The joy of Lily's breakthrough was a powerful balm, healing old wounds and forging new connections. Lily's progress was slow but steady. She began speaking more simple words at first, then short sentences. She started to engage with the world, her smile becoming less fragile, more frequent. The change in Julian was just as dramatic. The grief that had defined him for so long was replaced by a radiant, almost boyish happiness. He started spending less time in his study and more time with his daughter, rediscovering the father he thought he had lost. He treated Amelia not as an employee, but as a member of the family, with a respect and gratitude that humbled her. The awkwardness between Amelia and Ethan slowly melted away, replaced by a deep, powerful affection. They spent hours talking, walking through the winter gardens, discovering the people they were beyond their one night of anonymity. They were falling in love, quietly, carefully, in the heart of the miracle they had inadvertently created. The following months were a blur of quiet happiness. Amelia continued her work with Lily, but her role evolved from therapist to companion and friend. Ethan extended his stay, working remotely from his father's study, unwilling to leave the transformed world of Croft Manor. Their love story unfolded naturally, away from the pressures of the outside world. He showed her the man behind the billionaire's son, funny, kind, and carrying his own scars from his mother's death. She, in turn, allowed him to see past her own carefully constructed walls, revealing the brilliant, resilient, and deeply loving woman she was. He officially asked her on a date, a comical, formal affair, where they drove to a nearby town for dinner, pretending they were strangers, only to spend the whole time laughing about the absurdity of their situation. It was clear to everyone in the house what was happening. Eleanor would watch them with a knowing smile, leaving out extra cookies for their late-night talks. Even Sophia's watchful gaze seemed to soften, replaced by a grudging respect. One spring afternoon, as they sat by the newly opened swimming pool, watching Lily and Bear play a gentle game of fetch, Ethan turned to Amelia. He didn't have a ring, no grand speech prepared. He just looked at her, his heart in his eyes. "I can't imagine this life without you in it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know our story is backward and complicated, but it's our story. Will you marry me, Amelia?" Tears welled in her eyes as she said yes. It was the easiest decision she had ever made. Their wedding was a small, intimate ceremony held in the garden of the estate, the same garden where she had once walked with the silent girl, praying for a breakthrough. Lily was her maid of honour, her speech a few simple, heartfelt words that brought everyone to tears. Julian walked Amelia down the aisle, his face a picture of pure happiness. He wasn't just gaining a daughter-in-law, he was cementing the place of the woman who had saved his family. It was a perfect day, a celebration of a love that was born from chaos and coincidence. A year later, Amelia stood on the balcony of her and Ethan's suite at Croft Manor, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the old oak trees. Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her and resting his hands on her swollen belly. She was 6 months pregnant. Below, in the garden, Lily was teaching Bear a new trick, her laughter echoing through the air. Her disease was not gone. It was a shadow that would always be there. But she was living. She was happy, surrounded by a family that adored her. The specialist called her progress a medical anomaly, a 1 in a million remission. But the family knew what it was. It was the healing power of love, connection, and a clumsy Newfoundland puppy. Julian had found a new purpose, channeling his wealth into a new foundation dedicated to researching rare genetic disorders and funding alternative therapies. The house that was once a tomb of sorrow was now a vibrant, joyful home, filled with life and the promise of a new generation. Amelia leaned back against Ethan's chest, feeling the gentle kick of their baby. "Do you ever think about it?" she asked softly. "How random it all was. If Chloe hadn't gotten married, if Chase hadn't been at that club, if you hadn't been there at that exact moment." Ethan kissed the top of her head. "I don't think it was random at all," he said. "I think the universe was tired of seeing two good people get knocked down, so it decided to knock them into each other. Hard." She smiled, turning in his arms to face him. "I'm glad it did." He looked down at her, his eyes full of the same love and wonder he'd had on the day they met. "Me too," he whispered. "You were the miracle we didn't even know we were praying for." The sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the estate. It was a perfect ending, but they both knew it wasn't an ending at all. It was just the beginning of their beautiful, complicated, and utterly miraculous life together. Life in Croft Manor had found a new, beautiful equilibrium. It was a tapestry woven from the threads of past sorrow and present joy. Amelia, now a respected partner in Julian's foundation, brought her unique blend of clinical expertise and profound empathy to their work, helping other families who felt as hopeless as the Crofts once did. Her own past, once a source of pain and shame, had become her greatest strength, allowing her to connect with people on a level that textbooks could never teach. Ethan, who had once been a globe-trotting executive, found he preferred managing the company's American operations from the quiet of the manor. He had discovered that true success wasn't in a boardroom in a foreign city, but in the sound of his sister's laughter and the feeling of his wife's hand in his. The home was no longer silent. It was filled with the sounds of life, music, conversation, the happy barking of a very large dog, and the promise of a baby's cry. In the end, it wasn't the money or the medicine that saved them. It was a series of small, brave choices, an orphan who refused to give up, a father who dared to hope one last time, a brother who came home, and a stranger who chose to intervene in a dark corner of a nightclub. These moments, woven together by fate, created a miracle that rippled out, healing not just a sick girl, but an entire family. Their story reminds us that sometimes the most extraordinary things happen when we are at our most desperate, and that the right person can walk into your life at the wrong time and become the best thing that ever happened to you. Thank you so much for joining us on this emotional journey. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel for more cinematic stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment of fate that changed your life completely?